So reusable components होते हैं, you can like pick those and then create a product. What is the benefit? Maintains brand consistency. Once you have the system, each and every team, whosoever is involved in creating the product, follows that, and then because of that, you are able to maintain the consistency. As a product gets bigger, there is a chance to have several options for the same element, which may eventually bring confusion. And maintaining all of them is tough work. Not to mention it can easily increase expenses for development. So now once you have the common thing and common components or defined components, because of that, what will happen? Every individual who is part of the team will use the same component. And because of that, it's easy to maintain, and there will be consistency in all the designs. So standardized components used consistently and repetitively create a more predictable and easier to understand application. Speed, yes, you can create new application, new screens, new designs very quickly, because what you're doing is you are reusing the ready-made component. So ready-made components don't need to be designed twice. As the basics are done, designers have the freedom to focus more on the user needs and the pain points. So instead of focusing on the design and how to make this UI elements look good, they get more time to spend or invest on the user needs, then create solutions to solve the user's pain point or to remove the pain point. Our design system will speed up certain parts of the design process. It's going to make visualization or visualizing idea much faster, yeah, because they now get more time for this. So designers will be able to create mockups in fraction of the time. They already have these components. They are able to create like new screens, new designs quickly. Encourages collaboration. Now, since everyone is dependent on the design system, this enables or encourages collaboration. Developers, designers, and project managers often speak a different language, right? Like when they are not working together, or when there is not central system to define like how it should be done. So that time they face a lot of problem. But once they have the design system, they don't anymore discuss about these basic things. Then the discussion is about other things like how to improve the experience. So that is why it encourages collaboration. Implementing the design system helps design and development teams collaborate more effectively, yes, or efficiently. Scalability, very easy to scale any design because the core components are already there in the system. So you can create n number of screens very quickly. So design system helps create alignment within teams by providing a shared source of truth, a place to reference of official patterns and styles. So any team can scale their designs because of the availability of all the basic components. So whether evolving the style of your UI or make UX changes to a flow, using a design system reduces effort from hundreds of lines of codes to as little as few characters. When there is one place for all the components, there is no need to redesign every single button for each platform. Yes, the way of implementation may vary a lot based on the platform, but having shared defined styles and components make life much easier. Now, after having the design system, you can easily streamline experiences across all the channels. Fine. So if you're creating a form or a page on the website or for the website and also for the mobile, so you can kind of like create the same kind of experience, and as a result what will happen, or the user's expectation will be met. So having approved styles and components upfront gives designers the freedom and relieves the pressure of having every interaction of a design approved by the client. Fine. It allows the team to build out large chunks of the digital products at one time. Being able to reuse components such as buttons, icons, etc. across various platforms amplifies the brand consistency as well. The approach is extremely helpful because it breaks everything into smaller components that are developed one time, with the longevity of using those components an infinite amount of time wherever it makes sense. So it's all about, yes, having the component at central place and then reusing it, and there's brand consistency, and because of that you are able to develop complex applications, a lot of different flows, and still have the same experience. Okay. It saves time and resources. Yes, protecting valuable time and resources can be accomplished using a design system. So design systems gives all parties access to the styles, components, and code elements to effect change as needed. So with the design system in place, teams are more focused on innovation and or innovating and improving the customer experience, and less focused on ensuring table styles or icon styles are the same across the board or not. Now they're able to save time because of design system. The company is able to save a lot of time and resources and the money and all, because they are reusing these components, right, to build new screens, new applications, new journeys. It also improves usability. Why? Because once you're done with the component and once you have tested those components, you don't need to like go and test each and every screen every time you're creating new. It really improves the usability. Fine. By using a design system, you're able to avoid these conflicts by building a holistic library of components instead of per page, which means you will spend less time in quality assurance. So when putting the components in the design system, you do testing as a designer. So that's why like whenever you're creating a new screen, so you don't need to do testing again. And it really like saves time. And since you have already done the usability testing once, so you don't need to do that. So the final product is always like has the good usability. And similarly, built-in accessibility. Once you have defined everything, once you have checked all the accessibility factors and all, so you don't need to. As a result, what happens? Whatever you're building is accessible by most of the end users. They can easily use it. Now, we understood the basic things, right? Like what is design system, what is the importance, what are the different components and all. But how do we design this? So designing the system is what we'll learn now. So one, who should be involved? So teams required to create an effective design system. So who should be involved in this design system? So let's understand like who are generally involved in this. So one is what? The designers who actually design the elements or the components. And then the front-end developers to create modular efficient code. So once these components are designed, so what happens next is that the developer comes and they convert this visual design into codes. And there are also accessibility experts who do the testing, the accessibility testing of the components. Similarly, there are like content writers or the strategists who check the content and define the language, sets the guidelines for the content. Then there are researchers who can help you understand customer needs. Performance experts who can ensure your system loads quickly on all devices. So there are some developers or the experts who test the performance of the code. Similarly, the product managers to ensure the system is aligning to customer needs. Product managers are involved and they check that whatever you're designing meets the needs of the user or not. And then these are the advocates or basically the leaders, okay, VPs and directors to champion and align the vision throughout the company, including up to the executive leadership. So once you have the design system, so you need someone from the top management to force it into the system, into the company, right? Like so that everybody uses the same system. So only the leaders are able to do that. So that's why like having them in the team or involving them in the system is important. So once you have got the right skill sets presented in the design system team, identify strong leaders to represent each area. So once you have understood like, okay, so in order to build a particular design system, these are the 5 teams like design, developer, project manager, the content writer, and the accessibility and usability tester and so on. So once you have defined, so what should happen is like one representative from each team should participate in building this. The representative should be like someone who can take good decisions. He should be strong in leadership and all, right? So know who on the team can advocate for the areas of the design system. So basically you should know and then bring them to create this design system. And again, like when creating this design system, there are different models. So we'll understand like what are these models. So the team model that brings people together is as important as the team creating your design system. So one is like who is creating the design system, that's important. But again, like what is the model or like how this system is designed, that's also very important. So one is the solitary model. So one person rules it all. So there's one central person who connects with everybody and then creates the design system. The other is the centralized team model. A single team maintains the design system as a full-time job. So in the first one was like one person. The second is there is one single team, and that single team might have like many designers or developers. Then the last one is federated model. So team members from across the company come together to work on the system. So here what happens? One person representing design, one person representing technology, the other representing content, then the management. So they come together and they together manage the design system. So depending upon what is the size of the company, what is the complexity of the product the company is building, the model might change. Now let's understand what are the different steps to create a design system.
Sir, do we need to create design systems for every new project?
No, again, depends upon like what you're working on. Like if it's like small stuff, then you don't need to. Again, you need to like calculate like what is the effort required in creating the design system. If effort required is like too much and the return is low, then you should not.
Okay.
Okay. So again, if I'm working on a new initiative like an e-commerce website, right, or an e-commerce application or like a big application, so then in that case, I will for sure like design my own design system. Okay. But if I'm creating a website, then I might not. If I'm creating a static website, 5-page website, then I won't create a design system. But yes, if I'm
Okay,
creating a whole backend system, then yes.
okay, thank you.
So now let's understand what are the different steps to create a design system. So first, what we should do is like, if you have any existing screens, any website, anything, what you should first do is you should start creating the UI inventory. So that is basically go to the existing product, see what are the different kind of components that's used in that particular system. It could be like, the smallest thing, like could be the label, okay, the call to action, the buttons, the header size, the colors, the font size. So all those things, like whichever could be part of this inventory, UI inventory, you should include that. So here it could be like patterns, colors, text styles, icons, even the grid systems, right? So create an inventory of the UI components. So as when you're starting, you should first create an inventory of what's there, what has been used in the design. Okay, that is the first thing that you should do. The second is then get organizational buy-in for the design system. So once you have everything, once you can show that yes, there is inconsistency, so you should go and present this to the management that yes, see, like this is what is happening because we don't have the design system, and then try to get their buy-in. So once they agree, so you can then start creating the design system. And here, like when presenting, you can explain the inconsistencies that you discovered from your inventory building and how they adversely affect the user experience. So you can talk about this. And once you have this, create a design system team. Okay, like get one person from each team. Okay, so you need a team to implement and manage a design system throughout the entire cycle of product design. So it's a huge work, right? So most design systems team needs designers and front end developers. Start by identifying the skill sets you need, and then decide on the people who have them, and then bring them to work on it. List tools currently being used by the team. Also check like what are the different tools that is used to create the product. So it doesn't matter which tools you use, but it is very important to standardize these or those into the process. Each and every tool you use in design process, from notes collaboration to design, check with the team and define the tools you use. It could also be tools used by the developers. And then documents what each component is and when to use it. Design should include explanations or examples of functionality. Like if you have created a toggle button, then you should define both the active and inactive states and explain like when to use what and what should happen like after one interaction, second interaction, and so on. So everything should be like documented and put in the system. So this step is important. Give a general idea of what it should look like along with functionality in the same place. Documentation and standards are what separate a pattern library from a true design system. So earlier, like we used to use what style guide and pattern libraries and all, but that was like a limited document, right? Like it just had the list of the components and their designs reference and so on. But documentation was never part of those style guides. So, but in the design system, what we do, we also put the documentation, we define everything, why and how, and where to use, and all those things. And then also define the folders and the naming conventions. So define guidelines on how to name folders and files and how to maintain different versions of the same file. Now, sometimes what happens is like you might like revise few of the elements, like the buttons, the button size, or add new color. So those things should also be maintained in the system. So that is basically you should define like what change happened and also mention the version number. Fine. Make sure everyone knows what to use clearly with a defined naming conventions. Yes, it is annoying to spend half hour to look for some file or the most recent version. Organize correctly your folders with names and syntaxes that everybody knows, right? Everyone should know or should be aware of that. Establish rules and principles for the design system. Now, once you have the designs, once you have the components, you should start defining the rules. Okay, so and the principles like when what can be used and should not be used and so on. So this includes the technology also. So CSS in JavaScript or something else that you are going to use for writing the design system, how you are going to distribute the system, and if you're going to use one of your potential products as the starting point of. So it's all about like okay, so if there are some scripts, then where can the developer find those scripts, or like where it should be placed, and how should the different scripts be called, and if it's about the components, where can the designer find the components, like which part of the design system, and so on. So everything should be defined. Okay, and also build the color palettes for the design system. Include all the colors, primary, secondary, tertiary, like additional colors, text colors, font, then subtext colors, right? So all the colors should also be presented in the design system. So primary colors, naming conventions also, right? Because everybody follows their own style. So maintaining or explaining like what should be the right system is also important. And then build the typography scale for the design. Like you must have seen this, like the different fonts or fonts with different sizes, like 56, 44, 40, 32. This hierarchy of fonts. So that should also be maintained and defined, and explain like what font size should be used for what purpose and so on. And decide the typefaces also. So it could, what font you want to use. So you should define that, and also the scale. So everything should be defined and tested also. And along with that, also have the library of icons in your design systems. Okay, so design systems should also include all the icons, and then standard other style properties like the grids and other things, columns. Everything should also be designed and defined, including the white spaces. And then you can start building your design system. So bring everything together, start and arrange them in a very logical, in a very meaningful way, format and way. And once you have this, that means like you'll have a design system. Okay, and once you have this, it doesn't mean that that's the final one. Design system or building a design system is an iterative process. You might have to change a lot of things, as and when you're designing new screens or working on new screens. So here, what you need to do is, like when you're building the design system, you should start by identifying the best architecture for your pattern library and build it one by one. Okay. And then once you have something, run a sprint retrospective. So all product teams should organize regular retrospective sprints to analyze progress and make necessary improvement. So if there are like many teams working and creating this design system together, so then they should meet very often and present like what they have done and explain the progress, and also analyze like whether they are doing it right or wrong, and if not, if there is some improvement required, they should improve. Okay, so all these steps gives a sense of design guidelines that promote a consistent design language. This is an ongoing process. You won't be able to like get the perfect design system in one go. So it's a continuous process, and you improve as and when you're working on your designs and applications. Okay, so we understood about this. Now how to start this. So this is another way to understand this. Okay, and this is from this book Atomic Design by Brad Frost. So you should read this book for sure. So here what he has done is he tried explaining the design system with the help of atoms and molecules. And atoms makes molecules, or molecules makes organisms, and organisms, like by organizing different organisms, you are able to then create templates, and by adding or creating many templates, you can create a lot of pages, right? This methodology, so he had tried to explain this with the help of this atomic design theory. And as a designer, we should understand this theory and then use this theory or the method to create design systems. Okay, so now atomic design is a methodology composed of 5 distinct stages working together to create interface design systems in a more deliberate and a hierarchical manner. So we'll understand that. So these are the 5 stages. Okay, let's see. And this is mostly or specific, like when he's talking about the web pages, but this can also be like used for building any kind of systems, right? So let's understand this. So what are atoms? So atoms of our interface serves as the foundational building blocks that comprise all our user interface. So this is the smallest part of the component of the page. So that is the atoms. Okay, so these atoms include basic HTML elements like form labels, inputs, buttons, and others that can't be broken down any further without ceasing to be functional. So check on the right, like what you have this search this site. So that's a label, right? Similarly, enter the keyword. So that's a label. Search is a label or a button, right? So these are the smallest component of the smallest element of the whole page. So this is atoms. So each interface atom has its own unique properties, such as the dimensions of a hero image or the font size of a primary heading. These innate properties influence how each atom should be applied to the broader user's interface system. In the context of pattern library, atom demonstrates all your base styles at a glance, which can be helpful reference to keep coming back to you as you develop and maintain your designs. So this is the core and the basic and the most smallest components of your design system, okay, or the page and so on. Now, next is what? Next is the molecules. So molecules are relatively simple groups of UI elements functioning together as a unit. Now, previously what we saw was the atoms. So when you start grouping atoms, what you get is like you get the molecules. We'll like check on the top, like right. So search this site. That was the label. enter keyword was one another unit, then search, that CTA or the button was another one, right? Like when you combine together, this becomes the molecule. So for example, a form label, search input and button can join together to create a search form molecule. When combined, these abstract atoms suddenly have purpose. The label atom now defines the input atom, right? So everything is defined now. So now when these are like used as a single element, it doesn't make sense, right? Like, but when you start clubbing it, bringing it together, it starts adding functions to the system. So clicking the buttons atoms now submits the form. The result is a simple, portable, reusable component that can be dropped in anywhere such functionality is needed, right? This can be like reused many places on different screens. So this is what? This is molecules. Now let's see how we can combine these molecules to create organisms. Okay, so this is organism. So organisms are relatively complex UI components composed of groups of molecules and or atoms and or other organisms. On the right, if you'll see, what's happening is like this is top bar, right? So you have one uh, atom, that is the logo. Then you have a molecule like home, about, blog, contact, and then the third or the next molecule, the search this site. So when you can use different molecules and atoms to create organism. Fine. So these organisms form distinct sections of an interface. A search form can often be found in the header of many web app experiences. So let's put that search form molecule into the context of a header organisms. Organisms can consist of similar or different molecules. So again, like what's happening here is you're bringing different molecules and or atoms, and that basically forms the molecules, right? So we do that very often, correct? So this could become a one module, right? So this is one kind of module. So now let's see like how can we use different organisms to create templates. So templates are page level objects that place components into a layout and articulate the design's underlying content structure. So the home page template displays all the necessary page components functioning together, which provides context for this relatively abstract molecules and organisms. So now if you'll see, they're like different molecules, different atoms, different organisms, right? So when you start bringing this together in a very meaningful format, so what happens? You start getting, or you are able to then create templates. So by defining a page skeleton, we are able to create a system that can account for a variety of dynamic content. Here, what's happening? Here you can move things here and there and create new templates easily. Once you have these basic things defined, like the atoms, the molecules, and the organisms, so you can easily create new templates on the fly. So you can move the video to the right, you can bring the three images on the left and or shift it and remove the header. So you can do a lot of things. You can play around and then create new templates very easily once you have other things defined. Now let's see what are pages. So pages are specific instances of the template. Now, if there is a page for a service, right, or a product, so you can create thousands of different pages just by following that particular template, right? So pages are what? Are specific instances of templates. So you can replicate this. You can create a lot of different pages by using a template, okay, that show what a UI looks like with real representative content in place. So template is what? Template is like just the structure, but pages are with the actual content, with the actual information. Correct? The page stage is the most concrete stage of atomic design. This is what users will see and interact with when they visit your experience. This is what your stakeholders will sign off, and this is where you see all these components coming together to form a beautiful and functional user interface. Pages are essential for testing the effectiveness of the underlying design system. So once you have the design system and once you have these pages, only then you will be able to do the testing, check whether your design system is successful or not, or whether you need to do some changes or modifications. So that's the atomic design, right? So 5 distinct stages concurrently work together to produce effective user interface design system. So to sum up, what is this? The atoms are the smallest unit. Atoms, when combined together, makes up molecules, and then when many molecules or many components are clubbed together, that makes up the organisms, and then organisms, that these organisms and other stuff like other things, other elements like molecules and atoms can come together and create templates, and these templates are then used to create a lot of different pages, right, with the real content. So what is the advantage of the atomic design system? So the part and the whole. So one of the biggest advantages atomic design provide is the ability to quickly shift between abstract and concrete. We can see our interface broken down to the atomic elements and also see how these elements combine together to form our final experience. So part and the whole. So you can easily see, right? So when you are there on a page, you can easily figure out like, oh, this particular section is just the atom. So this to get three things makes up the molecules, and these 5, 6 things are making up the whole page. So you can easily start figuring out once you have the understanding of like how this atomic design works. So clear separation between structure and content. You saw this template and the final pages, right? So template is what? Is a structure, and pages is what? Is the structure plus the real content. Clear separation between structure and content. As a designer, you can easily figure out or understand this. So atomic designs gives us a language for discussing the structure of our UI patterns and also the content that goes inside this patterns. If you have the design system and if you are maintaining it, okay, so how do you maintain it? How can you increase the effectiveness? So you can increase the effectiveness of this system by making it official, okay? And whenever doing this, make use of some senior person from the senior management. So make it official by allocating real-time money and resources to your design system. Make it adaptable by counting on change and establishing a clear governance model, and make it maintainable by seeking the holy grail and making it easy to deploy and communicate changes to the design system. So make it cross-disciplinary by making your pattern library a watering hole the entire organization can gather around. Make it approachable by making an attractive, easy to use style guide with helpful accompanying documentation, and make it visible by communicating change, evangelizing the design system and making it public. Make it bigger by including brand, voice, tone, code, design principles, and writing guidelines. Also make it agnostic by naming patterns according to their structure rather than their context or content, and make it contextual by demonstrating what patterns make up a particular pattern and showing where each pattern is used. So overall, what should happen is like, one, make it official. Everybody should be aware that yes, there is a design system and everybody should be following that. And during the process, when you're using this design system, if there is something that requires change, you should do those changes in your design system. Okay, so making it adaptable. And your design system should be maintainable, right? So it should not be complex. It should be easy to maintain. So everybody should rely on it, make it cross-disciplinary, make it approachable. Approachable in the sense like the presentation of the design system should be good so that everybody should find it like interesting, right? And make it visible by circulating or talking about it in the company, and make it bigger by adding additional information, not just related to the product you're working on, the components and all the things, but also include other things like brand voice, okay, brand guidelines, and so on. And make it agnostic by naming patterns according to their structure rather than their context or content. So define everything, make it agnostic, and similarly make it contextual. So basically, what kind of pattern should be used where and how and everything. Okay, set the context and make it very easy for everyone to understand, like when different components and the systems can be used. Fine. So what is the future? The future of design system. So as company continues to grow and evolve and become more digital in nature, design system will be more common, correct? The need for consistency and efficiency across digital platforms will be in high demand. And yeah, so the future is bright. Now let's go and check like 1 or 2 design systems. So you will be able to understand then how this is, so useful. Let's check this Shopify thing. Now see this is a design system by Shopify, right? So how it's maintained. So basically they start with like Polaris is the name. So our design system helps us work together to build great experience for all Shopify merchants. So this is the basic principle that they're following here, right? So what are the guides? Let's experience. So check out these practical guides to help you understand how to design for this Shopify platforms using Polaris. Now they have this Shopify experience values, crafting the Shopify admin if you're working on some admin interface and all. So this is where you need to go. Designing apps for Shopify. So for the apps, this is the place. And internationalization is about the global standards that they follow, right? And what they have then done is they've then broken the whole system into like 4 sections. So one is the content, the second is the design, the third is the components, and the fourth is the experience. So now let's go and see the content guideline. Okay. So in the content guideline, what they have done is they talk about voice and tone. See on the left. Okay. So this section. So the first one is voice and tone. So what are voice and tone? Shopify voice guidelines, adapting tone by situation. So depending upon situation or the kind of message that you want to convey or express, so what kind of tone you should be using. And also grammar, basic, how to capitalize, okay, when writing a sentence, like what is the pattern that you need to follow, or if you're writing some header, like the second one should be like, in capital or not. So all those things are defined here. List, headlines, dates, what should be the format for dates, measurements, and those things. And also, like if you're using some address, like what is the right way to present that, correct? So everything is mentioned here. Punctuation, spelling, fine. So they are using color and not COLOUR, center CENTER, not CENTRE. So these standards are defined in the system, fine. So that whenever any new copywriter is hired to do some copy task, he will first have to refer this and then or understand the standards, and then he can go and write content. Similarly, the naming conventions, okay, so put clarity. So these are like some guidelines that they have, right? Put clarity over creativity. So don't use like technical jargons or like complex words or like creative words. The focus should be more on like clarity. Help establish a mental model for our audience. Differentiate Shopify from other products. So everything, you see this, everything is defined. So if you're writing about a product, so what kind of content should be written, like what should be the language, like help documentation, what kind, so vocabulary. And if you're releasing your app, okay, so what should be the message and how it should be like framed, right? So you see this, so everything is defined in this content section. Now let's go to the design. So here also, fresh visual, faster performance. So these are the basic principles. You are talking about these principles, right? So these are the principles. So whenever designing any screen, so these are what should be considered. Like it should be fresh, it should perform good, well, future friendly, right? And purposefully brand presence, familiarity across experiences, correct? And also then they have these principles like the colors, like what kind of color should be used. Fine. So they have the color palette like surface, on surface, primary, secondary, interactive, and also the defining like, okay, so border success subdued, then icon is like dark green, then surface success subdued, like all these patterns, everything is designed and defined. And also the specifications around that, when to use, what to use. Similarly, they have this typography, right? So they have basic principles here: style with purpose, stay flexible. Then they have this font size, and also check this. They have this CSS code also written for this. So this is for the developers. So in future, whenever the developers have to create some new, so instead of writing it again, they can easily copy and then use this in the code. There is variety of these text sizes here, and also the formatting is mentioned. Like, okay, so they should be perfectly aligned. It should always be left aligned, and kind of check box. Everything is mentioned. Display styles, this is how this display styles should be. Page heading, how to use, and never like have this left aligned, it should be like center aligned, whatever. So everything is defined. Similarly, let's go to the illustrations. So what are the principles? Fine. So these are the principles, these are the colors, and this is the style of the illustration. Okay, colors, and this is the style, then this space, shape, line. Okay, now, and where illustration lives. So where can you use the illustrations? Like you can use for all the empty states, and also somewhere like when you're onboarding something, announcements, making announcements, you can use this, correct? Where to use this sounds, everything is mentioned about the sounds also. Let's go to the icons. So they have this library of icons, right? So they're like different kinds of icons, and they also have mentioned like if you're creating a new icon, what should be the format. This is active, this is gray, and when to use icons. So in primary navigation, they can only use icons at these places like primary navigation, page headers, banners, inline with text. So everything is defined. Fine. Now interaction states also. I talked about this interaction design, right? So now if the button is like default, so what are the different styles? And then some spacing also, like what should be the spacing between different elements, like the text and this like 4 pixels, 8 pixels, description like 12 pixels should be like padding, correct? And whenever you're creating these kind of things like 4 pixels grid, you see this, everything is defined. And then some data visualization, let's check this also. So how to present data. If you're using any chart, this is how you need to use one color for all bars and not like multiple colors. And bar positioning, there's interactivity, like how that should work, like on hovering, this is how you should be presenting. For the lines, this is how you should be. Okay, everything is defined. So if you will start explore design system, like you will learn a lot. So my suggestion is you should check one of the design system, learn from it, and once you're done with that, you can move on and check the other design systems. So they have this Figma UI kit also, so you can download this kit and understand like how they have created their own design system. So these are the components, then templates, like icons. So download this, also these shadows, understand these. The more you will understand, the better you will get in design. So if you're starting, if you're this is just the beginning, this is the place, this is how you need to learn the design.